Hi, and welcome back to my shop. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you how to make these. You might ask, why in the world would I want to make those, Rob? Well, we're actually going to be making what gets cut out of these. And if you'll recall back to an earlier episode, I spent a lot of time working on this template. And this template's going to really help me to shape the sides to this step stool. And when I'm done doing that, we're going to end up with a lot of cutoffs that'll look a lot like this. If you'll remember back to when I was kind of doing my stock selection, I wanted to try to work around some of the defects. So I've got that knot down here, and I'm going to use that again to my advantage because I'm going to take that kind of curvy grain right there, and that will work nicely with my curvy bottom. I also have a few, did I just say curvy bottom? My apologies. I also have these two pin knots here that I'm going to work around. So I keep those off to the side. And then I have my other two pieces of stock here, which are pretty much clear. And it's really just going to come down to grain orientation that's going to dictate exactly how I line those up. Now that I have the boards laid out where I want, I've made sure that I have nice glue joints where the grain actually blends really well, and I'm pretty happy with how that works. The last thing I really want to do here is just make sure that everything really does work, and it's kind of hard to tell by laying the template down because I'm obscuring the part of the grain that I care the most about. So I'm sort of using the part I can see to infer the part I can't see. So what I'm going to do is just take a little piece of chalk and run it around the edge here. And then that'll give me just kind of that final proof point that I do have this laid out in the best possible way. So I can validate now that I am virtually completely free of defects. I have one tiny pin knot here, and I'm fine with that. Completely clear grain up here, and I've avoided all of the major defects in these boards. The rest of these will actually just sort of add character to the piece. Before I go ahead though and start gluing anything up, I want to do one more sanity check. So I'm going to take each of the mating boards and line them up right on top of the first layout that I did. And all this is going to do is verify for me that the layout and the grain will work on both sides. You of course always have some variation through the thickness of a board, especially something this thick. So I just want to double check and make sure I'm not actually putting a defect right in the middle of one of the mating boards. And I did put a little chalk mark here so I know pretty much where my foot has to go. And then I'll do the same thing and just trace my template and make sure that the grain works on this side as well. If I wanted to get really fancy, I could even flip all of these over, but I think checking one side of each mating pair should be safe enough. And it looks like I am in good shape. This is definitely one of the stranger glue ups that I've had to do, just because all of these boards line up in such an odd fashion. So it's actually this kind of weird combination of different size clamps that I need for this operation. I've got the material out of clamps now, and I'm admittedly wasting a decent amount of material, and that's effectively the trade-off you have to make when you really want to fine-tune your grain matching. So what I'm going to do is just take my jigsaw, and I'm going to remove kind of the excess material, still leaving a good amount because I am still have to do some smoothing and dimensioning on this, but I do want to make my life a little bit easier. Before I bring this over to the bandsaw, I do still need to sort of clean up the glue lines here. And this is basically a classic case where hand tools are by far the best method for the job. I obviously couldn't fit this through my planer, it's too wide, and even sending it through my drum sander in 2 passes would really kind of be a hassle when I can just take a jack plane and clean this up pretty quickly and easily. Now that I've got the thing roughed out, there's one other step I need to take before I'm going to actually bring this over to the bandsaw and cut to my lines. Now, if you look at the template again, you can see that there's a flat spot here and also on the front foot. And those two flat spots need to be coplanar as well, so that this will stay stable on the ground. So the best method for me to do that is with the track saw. I'm over at the bandsaw now, and I'm ready to rough out to the line that I marked. I just put the template down and ran a thin pencil line all the way around it. Now, you'll notice that a good portion of what I have to cut here is end grain. Now, when I eventually template route this, I'm going to put the piece of MDF back on top and run a piloted pattern bit around this. And running a bit against end grain can really cause challenges. So you want to remove the least amount of material possible at the router, meaning I want to remove the most material I can at the bandsaw. So I'm going to try to get as close to that pencil line, staying just outside of it. And the better job I can do there, the less work I'm going to have to do with the router, and the less danger I'll have of tear out on that end grain. Well, it is tedious work, but I finally got the entire shape cut out on the bandsaw. I just touched the pencil line in a couple spots, so I think I'm going to be okay. I got really close, so I think I'm going to have an easier time with the router since I really took my time with this shape. I also ended up with some really cool cutoffs that I'm going to sort of call modern art. What I'll be using is a 1-inch diameter piloted template routing bit. And the reason I'm going with this larger bit is that I'm going to get more of a shearing motion, whereas if I had a smaller bit, the angle of attack would be a lot steeper. And because I'm doing so much end grain on this thing, the bigger bit I can use, I think the better surface I'm going to end up with off the router. I've got little strips of double stick tape kind of at all of the extremities of the blank, and basically that's just to ensure that the template doesn't flex at all and really holds all of the edges nicely when I'm running the router around it. Now, to actually do the template routing, I'm going to break the job up into 3 sort of simple pieces. I'm going to run the bit along this edge first, then I'll do the opposite edge, and then I'll do the bottom. Now, one thing I really want to be careful of is these tips here. They're very small, sort of narrow tips, and there's a lot of end grain going on there. So I'm really going to avoid trying to route around those tips. I'm going to just start on this edge when I run this side, and I'm going to start on this edge when I run this side. And I'm going to use my oscillating spindle sander to do the final cleanup on those tips, because I really don't want to risk anything tearing out, because it would be really easy to mess that up. Alright, so I got rid of all the dust and shavings. That kind of makes a mess. Even with the dust collector hooked up, there's really nothing to catch the chips as they expel out the bottom of the router, so it was kind of a messy operation. But I'm all set, and if I can pry this off, it's always kind of a fine balance between making sure that the template is secured, but also making sure that you can remove it without doing any damage to the template, or worse, your workpiece. So I'll just have to go and kind of get the double stick tape off, but you can see that I have a reasonably nice finish edge there. I've got a little bit of burning here, but it's nice and smooth. I'm gonna basically just run this a little bit on the spindle sander to clean it up, and then I'm gonna just switch to regular hand sanding to get the final edge on there. But I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I am ultimately going to put a profile around these edges as well. One other thing I thought I would try here is I'm going to double stick tape the two sides together before I bring them over to the spindle sander. Basically, that's just going to ensure that any shaping that I do will result in two identical sides. Because I do have to sort of manually clean up the corners, or the the top and bottom points, and I want to make sure that any variation that I might have in there gets reflected on both pieces. And here you can see the finished sides off of the spindle sander, and really all I need to do is just now go back with some finer grits of sandpaper and clean this up a little bit more. But that is pretty much the final form and shape, and then the next step will be to start thinking about the steps that we'll connect it to.